Hi everyone. I never thought I'd be sharing my story here, but I guess life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. My name is Mike, and for the past 10 years, I was married to a woman named Sarah. We had what I thought was a pretty good life. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any other couple, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that Wednesday evening. I got home from work, and Sarah was waiting for me at the kitchen table. Now, whenever a spouse says, "We need to talk," it's rarely good news, right? She asked me to sit down, and the moment I looked at her face, I knew something was off. There was this weird nervous energy in the air, and it made my stomach turn. "I need to tell you something, but you need to promise not to get mad," she began. I didn't say a word, just waited for her to continue. She took a deep breath and went on, "Mike, you know I love you, and I would never do anything to hurt you, but I want to be honest with you because I think it's important for our relationship." That statement threw me off, and I immediately felt a wave of dread. Then she dropped the bomb. "I've met someone else, but I don't want to leave you," she said. "It's just that I feel like I need more, something different, someone else occasionally. I want to take a lover." I sat there, stunned, barely able to believe what I was hearing. "Let me get this straight," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You love me, want to stay with me, but you also want to sleep with someone else on the side?" She nodded, as if it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "It would be just a casual thing," she said. "I would never hide anything from you, and I'm sure it wouldn't affect our relationship. I still love you, Mike, but I need this. If you love me, you'll understand." Now, let me tell you, I had no clue how she could possibly think this wouldn't mess up our marriage. "Have you already planned this out?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. "Yeah," she replied, "we were thinking about going away next weekend." That was the last straw. "Okay, Sarah," I said, "how would you feel if I told you I wanted to sleep with another woman? Would you be cool with that?" She hesitated for a moment, clearly caught off guard. "I think I would be okay with it, as long as it didn't affect us." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "You know damn well you wouldn't be fine with it, Sarah," I snapped. "If the roles were reversed, you'd be losing your mind. You really thought I'd just be okay with this?" Her face fell, and she muttered something about not expecting me to be so angry. "I thought you loved me enough to let me do this," she said quietly. "Whatever you're smoking, it's illegal," I shot back. "Did you seriously think I'd be cool with you spending a weekend with another guy while I'm stuck at home? Are you out of your mind?" She looked shaken. I didn't think you'd say no." "Well, you didn't think this through at all, did you?" I said, standing up. "Give me a few days to think about it. We'll talk again on Sunday." With that, I went to our bedroom and started packing my things. I was moving into the guest room. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling a little. "I don't want to sleep in the same bed with someone who's thinking more about another guy than they are about me," I told her flatly. Then I slammed the door behind me. That night, I barely slept, lying awake in the guest room, my mind racing. I knew one thing for sure: if she went through with this, our marriage was over. I couldn't live with that kind of betrayal. But I had a plan. The next morning, I left the house at my usual time but didn't say a word to her. The next morning, I called my job and told them I needed a couple of days off for personal reasons. They were understanding, so I spent the day setting my plan in motion. I wasn't just going to sit around and let Sarah do whatever she wanted without knowing all the details. If she was serious about going through with this, I needed to be prepared. First, I went out and bought 3 voice-activated recorders. I placed one near the home phone, one in our bedroom, and the last one in her car. I also managed to get my hands on a phone tap recorder, which I hooked up to our landline. Then I headed to our cell phone provider since the account was under my name. It was easy enough to get access to Sarah's phone records. What I found was revealing, to say the least. When I got home, I cracked into her email accounts. There was one I didn't even know existed, but the password wasn't hard to figure out. What I found in there confirmed what I already suspected. She and her so-called lover, a guy named Tom, had been exchanging emails, and they were planning to go away together that very weekend. At least I found some relief in knowing they hadn't slept together yet. From there, I set up her email to forward any incoming messages directly to me, so I'd know what they were saying in real time. Finally, I picked up a couple of small GPS trackers. One went into her wallet, and the other got stashed in her car. By the end of the day, I had everything in place to track her every move. Now, it was just a matter of waiting. Friday came around, and I decided to take things a step further. I contacted a divorce lawyer, someone highly recommended by a friend. I laid everything out for him, the emails, the phone records, and my plans to gather more evidence. He was impressed and agreed that we could file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, as long as I had concrete proof. He also suggested that we sue Tom for alienation of affection, a legal action I hadn't even considered. All I needed now was hard evidence of the affair, and I was determined to get it. That evening, Sarah came home as usual. I didn't say a word to her. When she started making dinner, I grabbed my keys and headed out to a bar. I wasn't in the mood for small talk or pretending everything was fine. I needed space to think and to brace myself for what was coming. Later that night, when I got back, she tried to talk to me. But I wasn't interested in anything she had to say. I walked past her without even acknowledging her and locked myself in the guest room. At this point, it was clear, the only way to salvage our marriage was if she cancelled her plans with Tom. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Saturday morning, I ignored her completely. I didn't want to engage in any conversation, didn't even want to look at her. By Sunday, it was time to have that talk we'd scheduled. We sat down in the kitchen, just like we used to do when everything was normal. "Have you thought about what I said?" I asked, getting straight to the point. "I have," she said, her tone firm. "And I still want to go through with it." I felt my heart sink, but I kept my voice calm. "Sarah, this will destroy our marriage. You can't seriously believe this won't change things between us." "I think you're overreacting," she said, crossing her arms. "If you looked at this from my point of view, maybe you'd understand." "I have looked at it from your perspective," I shot back. "And I can't see any way that this ends well. So my answer is no." She huffed in frustration, clearly not expecting me to stand my ground. "How can you be so selfish? If you loved me, you'd let me do this." "I'm the selfish one," I said, nearly laughing at the absurdity of it all. "You want to sleep with another man, but I'm selfish for saying no. Come on, Sarah, that's ridiculous." There was a long pause before she asked, "What happens if I do it anyway?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Then there will be consequences. Serious consequences. We made vows when we got married. We promised to be faithful to each other. If you break that promise, we're done." She didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me, and then quietly replied, "Well, I guess this conversation is over then." I got up from the table and walked out of the house. My mind was made up. There was no going back now. If she followed through with her plan, I was filing for divorce. By the time Thursday rolled around, I had everything in place for the weekend. The final straw came when I checked Sarah's emails again. She and Tom had confirmed their plans. He'd booked a room at a fancy hotel in Kansas City. They were going to meet Friday afternoon and spend the weekend together. The way they talked about it, you'd think they were planning a romantic getaway instead of committing adultery. But what really made me sick was how nonchalant Sarah seemed. As if my feelings didn't even factor into her decision. I reserved the same hotel room they had planned to stay in, only I booked it for Thursday night, the day before they were supposed to meet. My goal was simple. I wanted to set up cameras in the room to capture everything that went down. Not just to protect myself during the divorce, but to make sure I had enough evidence to sue Tom for alienation of affection. This wasn't just about ending my marriage anymore, it was about making sure both of them paid the price. That afternoon, I took the day off work and drove to Kansas City. I checked into their hotel room and spent a couple of hours setting up everything. The fiber optic cameras were small and easy to hide, perfect for getting the footage I needed. I tested them all to make sure they were working properly. Once everything was in place, I headed home, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and grim satisfaction. Back at home, I made one last stop at a store and bought a small can of pepper spray. I had an idea for a little parting gift for Sarah and Tom. That night, Sarah acted like everything was normal, like she wasn't about to blow up our marriage the next day. It was almost impressive how calm she was. Meanwhile, I could barely stand to look at her. Friday morning arrived, and I got up early. Sarah didn't know it, but I had already signed the divorce papers at my lawyer's office the previous day. All I needed now was the evidence, which I'd have by the end of the weekend. The plan was simple: serve her the divorce papers at her work on Monday, and make sure Tom got his as well. I checked Sarah's GPS tracker and saw she was at a salon, probably getting her hair done for her big weekend. While she was gone, I went through her suitcase. I found the new lingerie she had bought for Tom, something she'd never worn for me. It stung, but I had expected it. That's when I pulled out the pepper spray. I sprayed it directly on the crotch of her panties and the cups of her bra. It was petty, sure, but after everything she was putting me through, I figured I deserved this small moment of satisfaction. With that done, I closed her suitcase and left it exactly as I had found it. Then, I headed to the bank. I closed all of our joint accounts and transferred the money into a new account in my name. I also canceled all the credit cards that had both of our names on them. After that, I made my way back home, ready to say my final goodbye. At around 12:30, I knew Sarah would be getting ready. I walked upstairs to her room and found her standing in front of the mirror in the lingerie she'd bought for Tom. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, there was an awkward silence. "You sure went all out for him, didn't you?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She looked away, but I wasn't done. "Too bad you never made that much effort for me." "Mike, it's not like that," she said, her voice weak, as if she knew she'd lost any ground she might have had with me. "I just wanted to feel good, that's all." "You wanted to impress him," I shot back. "You're more worried about what he thinks than what I've thought for the last decade." She didn't respond, but I wasn't interested in hearing excuses anyway. I walked up to her, took her left hand in mine, and began slipping off her wedding ring. "This meant something to me," I said quietly, "but not to you. I don't want you wearing the ring I gave you when you're out there stroking someone else." She didn't resist, just stood there, watching as I slipped the engagement ring and wedding band into my pocket. "The engagement ring was my mother's," I added. "So I'll be keeping that." I let go of her hand and stepped back. "Look, Sarah, I won't be here when he picks you up. But let me make one thing clear, don't bring him into this house. If you do, there will be hell to pay. Do you understand?" She nodded, looking stunned. "I won't. I promise." "Good," I said, turning to leave. "I'll be watching." As I walked out, I could hear her calling my name, but I didn't turn back. I didn't need to hear anything else. I was done. I parked my car down the street, where I could keep an eye on the house without being seen. Part of me hoped she'd change her mind, but deep down, I knew she wouldn't. This was who she was now. A couple of hours later, Tom's car pulled up. I watched as he walked to the door and rang the bell. Sarah came out with her suitcase in hand, and what did she do? She gave him a long, deep kiss right there on the front porch. Then, she looked in my direction, as if she knew I was watching, and smiled. That smug smile was the last straw for me. I flipped her off as they drove away, and her smile disappeared. I drove straight to Kansas City, checked into my hotel room near theirs, and set up my laptop. By the time I had the cameras running, I saw them entering the room. They wasted no time getting undressed, and I could see Tom fumbling around in bed with her. It didn't take long to notice something that almost made me laugh. Tom wasn't exactly well endowed, if you catch my drift. Sarah had traded in a 10-year marriage for a guy who, let's just say, wasn't bringing much to the table. It was petty, I know, but watching the scene unfold gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. She had thrown away everything we had for this? What a lousy trade. Tom barely lasted a few minutes, and judging by the look on Sarah's face, she was far from satisfied. That was when I realized I'd made the right decision. She wasn't just betraying me, she was humiliating herself. I couldn't watch much more of their pitiful affair, so I left everything recording and went out for a drink. When I got back to the hotel later that night, they were already asleep. Sarah looked frustrated, and Tom, well, he looked pretty satisfied with himself. It didn't matter to me anymore. I had the footage I needed to move forward with the divorce. The rest was just a bonus. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed for the first time in days. I grabbed some breakfast, picked up a few snacks, and made sure everything was still recording back in their room. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was savoring every moment of their disaster. Knowing that this weekend was not going how Sarah had envisioned gave me a sense of justice. Around mid-morning, I called a local florist. Every year on our anniversary, I used to send Sarah a bouquet of flowers, always the same arrangement. But this year, I had something else in mind. I ordered the exact bouquet and had it delivered to their hotel room with a card. I didn't bother signing it, the flowers themselves would be enough to get under her skin. The timing was perfect. They had gone out for a bit and returned just as the flowers arrived. I watched through the cameras as Sarah's face changed from surprise to discomfort the moment she saw them. She opened the card, and though I couldn't see what was written, I knew she immediately suspected me. Not long after, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Hello." I answered, playing dumb. "Did you send me these flowers?" she asked, her voice tense. "Why would I send you flowers, Sarah? You're with Tom. Did he forget to buy you some? They're just like the ones you always send me for our anniversary." "I know you sent them." I let out a cold laugh. "Well, first of all, you and your little boyfriend didn't tell me where you were, so I'd have no idea where to send flowers. Second, if I had sent you anything, it wouldn't have been flowers, it would have been poison ivy. Enjoy your weekend with Tom, Sarah. Don't call me again." Before she could say another word, I hung up. I could see her dialing my number again, but I didn't answer. She threw the flowers into the trash, clearly rattled by the reminder of what she was throwing away. That was only the beginning of my fun. Since I had their room number and their weekend was already falling apart, I decided to up the ante. A little while later, they were back in bed, Tom trying to make another go at it. I figured this was the perfect moment to send a pizza to their room, Sarah's favorite. I called up the hotel's go-to-delivery place and placed an order in her name. About 10 minutes into their lovemaking session, there was a knock on the door. The pizza delivery guy stood there with a box, asking for payment. Tom, already irritated by the interruption, had no choice but to deal with it. When he refused to pay, the delivery guy insisted that the room number and phone number matched, threatening to call the cops if he didn't pay up. Tom eventually gave in and paid for the pizza, his mood clearly soured. They ended up eating it, probably because they didn't want to waste it, but you could tell from the tension in the room that this wasn't how either of them had imagined their romantic weekend. Later, after they'd eaten and were trying to relax, I decided to hit them again. This time, I called a sandwich shop and ordered Sarah's favorite sub to be delivered. By the time it arrived, Tom was once again on top of her, and the knock at the door sent him into a full-blown rage. Sarah, meanwhile, was starting to put the pieces together. "He knows where we are," she said, her face pale as she looked at the sandwich. "He's messing with us." Tom didn't want to believe it, but she explained how I'd hacked into her email and must have seen their plans. I couldn't help but smile as I watched her realization set in. She knew I was a step ahead, and she knew there was no way I was letting this weekend go smoothly. They decided to go out for a while, probably to get away from the string of deliveries. I stayed back, laughing to myself as I imagined their growing frustration. I knew this wasn't over yet. When they returned, they took a shower and got ready for their big romantic night out. Sarah pulled out her sexy lingerie, the same set I'd sprayed with pepper spray, and started to get dressed. She even did a little twirl for Tom, showing off her outfit. He was eager to get her back into bed, but she insisted they save it for after dinner. I sat back in my hotel room, watching the cameras and waiting for the pepper spray to do its work. It didn't take long. Less than an hour after they returned from their night out, Sarah ran into the bathroom, tearing off her clothes. When she emerged, her skin was bright red, and she looked like she was in serious pain. Her chest and crotch were covered in red splotches, and she was clearly uncomfortable. She tried to lie down, but every time Tom touched her, she'd snap at him, telling him she was in too much pain. He looked confused, asking if she was allergic to something in the lingerie. Sarah had no clue what was going on, but the night was officially ruined. There was no chance of any more romantic encounters, not with her in that state. I couldn't help but laugh. Karma had done its job. Sunday morning arrived, and I knew the end was near. I packed up my things, satisfied with how the weekend had played out, and headed back home. Sarah and Tom were in for one last round of hell before everything blew up for good. When I got back, I made sure everything at the house was ready for her return. The locks had been changed, and I had packed up most of her belongings, placing them in garbage bags by the front door. She wouldn't be staying here any longer than necessary. Around mid-afternoon, Sarah came home. I was sitting on the couch, watching a football game, pretending not to notice as she walked in. She looked at me with a strange mix of hope and nervousness. "I'm back," she announced, like it was no big deal. I barely glanced at her. "Yeah, I see that," I replied, my voice as flat as I could make it. She walked between me and the TV, trying to catch my attention, and gave me a little smile. "Aren't you happy to see me?" I finally turned to look at her. "Happy?" I scoffed. "What on earth would make you think I'd be happy to see you? You think I got stupid over the weekend? I know exactly what you were doing." She looked taken aback, as if she didn't expect me to be so blunt. "I didn't think it would bother you this much," she mumbled. "I thought you might." "I don't know, get past it." I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Sarah, I loved you with everything I had, but the moment you walked out of this house with that guy, it was over for me. You broke my heart, and now I don't care if you came back or not." Tears welled up in her eyes as she stepped closer. "I know I made a huge mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "But we can work through this, can't we? I'll do anything to make it up to you." I stood up and looked her dead in the eyes. "Anything?" I asked, my voice cold. "Then get on your knees and beg for my forgiveness. Maybe then, I'll consider it." She hesitated, clearly not expecting that. "I can't do that," she whispered. "Exactly," I said, backing away. "You won't even do that. So don't give me this 'I'll do anything' crap. You made your bed, now lie in it." She tried again, her voice desperate. "Please, Mike, I love you. I was thinking about you the whole way home. I want to be with you." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "You want to be with me now? After what you did all weekend? Let me ask you something, did Tom use a condom every time?" She looked at me, stunned. "No, but I can't get pregnant, and he's married. He's clean, Mike." It wasn't like that. I shook my head in disgust. You don't know that. Do you think you're the only woman he's pulled that line with? As far as I'm concerned, you're damaged goods now. I'm not touching you until you get a full checkup. And even then, I don't think I could ever be with you again. Her face crumbled. I know he's clean, Mike. But if you want, you can use a condom. I cut her off, the anger rising again. Right. You expect me to use protection with my own wife because you couldn't keep your legs closed with some loser? That's not happening. She tried one last time. I really want to make love to you tonight. I need you, Mike. Make love? I said, shaking my head. You didn't make love to him. *******ed him. And there's no way I'm getting in bed with you after that. In fact, I don't even want to look at you tonight. You can sleep in the guest room. I'll take the master bedroom, seeing as I didn't do anything wrong. Her face fell, but she didn't argue. She knew she had lost this battle. Can we at least talk about it? She asked, her voice small. We can talk tomorrow after you get back from work, I said, heading for the door. But I'm not sure what else there is to say. I left the house and headed to a nearby bar, just to clear my head. I wasn't interested in drinking, I just needed to be away from her. The truth was, I had already made up my mind. This marriage was dead, and no amount of begging or talking was going to change that. When I got back home later that night, I found her lying in our bed. Get out, I said firmly. You don't belong here anymore. This is our bed, she argued, but her voice lacked conviction. I have just as much right to it as you. You gave up that right the moment you walked out with him, I shot back. So either get out, or I'll drag you out myself. She started crying, but she got up and left the room. I closed and locked the door behind her, ignoring the sound of her sobbing as she walked down the hallway. It didn't matter anymore. Nothing she could say or do was going to fix what she had broken. The next morning, I barely acknowledged her as she got ready for work. She looked at me with tearful eyes and said, I love you, Mike. I didn't respond with anything more than a cold, indifferent look. I used to love you too, I replied, emphasizing the past tense. The tears started to flow again as she turned and left the house. As soon as she was gone, I began packing the rest of her things into garbage bags. It was time for her to be out of my life for good. After Sarah left for work that morning, I got down to business. I packed all her remaining belongings into garbage bags and placed them by the front door. Every item felt like I was getting rid of a piece of the past, a life I could no longer recognize. Once everything was ready, I made a call I'd been waiting to make. I reached out to Tom's wife, Jenny. She picked up the phone, clearly surprised to hear from me. Hey, Jenny. This is Mike, Sarah's husband, I said, my voice calm but direct. Do you know where Tom was this past weekend? Jenny hesitated, her voice uncertain. He told me he was on a business trip. Why? I took a deep breath. He wasn't on a business trip. He spent the weekend with my wife, Sarah. I've got all the proof you need, emails, texts, everything. I'm willing to share it with you if you want to know the truth. There was silence on the other end of the line, and then I heard her voice crack. You have proof? Yes, I said firmly. And I can send it to you. Or better yet, we can meet up, and I'll show you everything. To my surprise, Jenny agreed. We arranged to meet later that afternoon. When I arrived at her house, I was taken aback. Jenny was absolutely stunning, tall, blonde, and beautiful in a way that made me wonder how Tom could be so foolish. I could tell she was equally surprised to see me, but we didn't dwell on it. There was too much to discuss. I laid everything out for her, emails between Tom and Sarah, phone records, the video evidence I had gathered over the weekend. She was furious, but she held it together. We talked for a while, and by the end of it, Jenny decided to hire my divorce lawyer to handle her case too. The lawyer agreed to take both of our cases, and even offered a discount for handling them together. As we left the office, Jenny thanked me for telling her the truth. "I can't believe this is happening," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "I know," I replied. "But we'll get through it. We deserve better than this." We said our goodbyes, and I returned home, ready for what came next. It wasn't long before my phone rang. It was Sarah, and she sounded panicked. "What the hell is going on, Mike?" she yelled. "I just got served with divorce papers at work. And Tom got papers too, he's being sued for something. What the hell is this?" I didn't bother pretending to be sympathetic. "It's exactly what I told you would happen if you went through with your little weekend adventure. Consequences, Sarah. Did you really think there wouldn't be any? I didn't think you'd actually do this," she whimpered, her voice small and defeated. "Well, you thought wrong. Now, if you want to talk more, we'll discuss it when you get back to the house. I'm done with this conversation for now." I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. Then, I went outside, grabbed the garbage bags full of her stuff, and tossed them into the front yard. I was done being nice. She had made her choices, and now she'd have to live with them. When Sarah pulled into the driveway later that day, she stormed out of the car, her face red with rage. She started screaming at me the moment she saw her things scattered across the lawn. "How could you do this to me?" she shrieked, spit flying as she raged at me. "You're ruining everything." I stood there, calm and collected, watching her unravel. "I didn't ruin anything, Sarah. You did that all on your own when you chose him over me. You're the one who destroyed our marriage." She was sobbing now, her words barely coherent as she kept yelling. "I thought you loved me." "I did love you," I said quietly. "I loved you more than anything. But you didn't love me. If you had, you wouldn't have done what you did. You threw us away." Her tears kept flowing, but I was done. "Now, you need to leave. Take your stuff and go. You've lost the right to be here." She didn't argue. She knew it was over. She collected her things, her sobs filling the air as she loaded them into her car. I handed her one final item before she left, the wedding ring I had taken from her before. I had hammered it flat, turning it into nothing more than scrap metal. "Here," I said, dropping the ring into her hand. "It's worthless now, just like our marriage. Maybe you can pawn it." I leaned in and kissed her gently on the forehead, the last time I would ever touch her. "Goodbye, Sarah," I whispered, and then I turned and walked back into the house without looking back. For the next hour, I sat in my empty home, tears streaming down my face as I let out all the pain and anger I'd been holding in. I cried until I had nothing left, and then I stood up, wiped my face, and made a choice. I wasn't going to let this break me. I had 3 options: drown myself in alcohol, do something reckless and end it all, or move on with my life, knowing that I hadn't done anything wrong. The answer was clear. I wasn't going to let Sarah or Tom destroy me. I had done nothing wrong, and I deserved better. That evening, I made a phone call to Jenny. We had already bonded over the chaos of our shared situation, and I figured dinner wouldn't hurt. She agreed to meet, and as we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Maybe we'd just be friends, or maybe it would turn into something more. Either way, I knew I was moving forward. As I sat there, thinking about everything that had happened, a small smile crept across my face. Sarah might have broken my heart, but she didn't break me. I was free. That's the end of my story. If you're going through something similar, just know that there's life after betrayal. And sometimes, walking away is the best decision you can make.
Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.